Gave this a quick sand, not on this part yet, but I'll get to that when I attach it to the ukulele probably, so I can get it flush all at the same time. I gave it a quick sand and it already looks a lot better. I'm using some 330 grit or 320 grit sandpaper, and I think what I'm going to do next is print out a design, or draw one up maybe. I'll probably just print one out and then file it into the end here so we can get something nicer looking than a square. Alright, so I drew some lines here so I could get an idea of the geometry, and I couldn't find a design that I liked particularly well on the internet, nor could I figure out how to line it up with this easily, so I just sketched one on here. So I'm going to get a file and just start roughing this out. So I've marked out where my sound hole is going to go, and now I'm going to just sketch my bracing pattern. I'm doing an asymmetrical bracing pattern for the soundboard and a nice stable one for the back plate. I'm going to sketch that on here and go lay my basswood braces. So this soundboard wood is from close to the middle of the tree instead of close to the outside, which isn't ideal for sound, but it'll look good at least. We'll see what happens. I'm going to start by gluing these two braces down because they're going to be slightly taller than the rest of them. And then once I glue those down, I'll use my 1/4-inch chisel that I just sharpened to carve them down to shape, and then start gluing the rest of these. Alright, I've clamped a piece of scrap wood here to act as a fence. I've got this piece secured. I'm going to start carving these down. I have a friend with a bandsaw, and I'm going to run this over to their house to cut this out after I get all these braces in, I think. And I'm planning on leaving just about this much room that's already on the sides all the way around so that I can just route it perfectly flush when I finally get it glued up to the sides. Right now I'm using a 1/2-inch chisel. Alright, I've got this taped close enough to the center. It's kind of a hard shape to square up, if you could believe that. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is place each piece as close as I can to where it's supposed to be, while leaving enough of a gap in between that the wood won't collapse when I hug out the inlays. And then I'm going to just go ahead and get them all put in. The reason this masking job is so bad is because I ran out of tape. I suppose I better do another update soon here. So basically what I've been doing for the past more than a week now is just using this teeny tiny router bit, this little bitty end mill, probably a 32nd of an inch if I remember correctly, and carving this thing out. I printed out an exact copy of this because I started with a pencil drawing, so I could just make a photocopy, tape it on here, and cut out the outlines with this real carefully. And then I went and hogged out all the insides, and I've scribbled in the bottoms of the ones that I've gotten to their final depth. And I'm just going to go through and deepen them all up until the pieces fit almost flush, glue them all in, and stone them down, sand them down, some wet or dry to keep the dust off it, and I think we'll be good to go. This is the second test fit. Everything almost flush, which is pretty good. One of these pieces, oh sorry about that, one of these pieces, this one here, needs to be shimmed up a little because I made the hole a bit too deep, but the rest of them are looking pretty good, except for these two that don't fit in because somehow I messed up the edges after all that sketching, but I'll grab those in a sec. But yeah, I think it's almost ready. Pretty exciting. Alright, this is the final test fit, and I think it's doing just what I need it to. In case you're wondering, for the shims, I'm using chips from the soundboard bracing that I chiseled off. I'm just waiting for that one to dry before I put it in. And so I'm going to go ahead and glue these all down, I think, and then I can go ahead and start sanding. Also, I'm considering just sanding this outside with a fan on it, blowing the dust like into the woods or something, so I don't have to worry about raising all this grain and messing with the glue joint in the middle if it gets too wet. I was originally going to file the spike on the back of the eye into a sharp point and then just hammer it into the correct place. But I don't want to risk any crackage, and the point I got wasn't that sharp because I used a tube instead of a solid wire on the back of the eye. So I'm just going to use this 1/16 drill bit to make a spot for it. Well, that's a 2-month detour done. Time to start finishing this thing. I'm going to start with some nice sandpaper to get this flush. Then I'm going to go ahead and use this mahogany wood filler to just get those little cracks by on the sides. And then slap this whole ukulele together. Alright, I'm now going to mask this off so that when I sand it, hopefully I won't get too much of this abalone gunk in the pores of my mahogany. It might be a false hope, it might just leak right under, the tape might come straight off, but we'll have to see. It's probably going to be better than nothing. So I just slapped some tape over it, used a pencil to get the outline, and I'm going around it with this thumb plane blade because I can't find a box cutter or an X-Acto knife that has a similarly small and sharp blade, but hey, it works. Okay, here's the plan. I'm going to use this sandpaper on this, give it a little spritz, and then hopefully the dust won't be too bad. Oh boy, this is just going swimmingly. The masking tape is degrading just about as fast as it did in my deepest, darkest nightmares, but I'm just going to push on and hope it all turns out okay. Here's how it's looking right now. This thing just looks spectacular when it's wet. I can't wait to get a varnish over the top of it. I'm bailing on the fine grit and the nice pretty pores and all that crap. I'm just going to take this 320 and get it down to flush. Alright, we've got it flushed down to the point where you can just feel the edges. So I think that means that it's basically level with the wood, and all we're feeling is the little ridges where there's just boundaries there. So we did have one little oopsies with that piece. It came out. But that's not a big problem. I can just go ahead and glue it back in. Alright, I'm going to go up to an 800 grit on this. If I'm feeling fancy, I might hit it with polish, but I'm probably not going to do that because I'm putting a varnish on top. And then I'm going to call it good. Alright. Alright, I have it up to 800 grit, and here's how we're looking before the final step, which is to put some mahogany wood putty in all the cracks around these things so they look real nice and smooth on the edge. Now, there are, of course, a couple natural inclusions, like this piece I filed down past the natural nacre layer here, and it's got some non-iridescence on the edge. Some of these pieces have pockets. All of them have these amazing contours, which are of course non-iridescent. That's just what you get when you're working with these organic materials. Yeah. Alright, I want to test this wood putty. So what I'm going to take this corner here that's outside where the uke's going to be. I'm just going to go ahead and stab it with a pencil. Put a nice hole, I think. Is that going to be big enough? Yeah, it could be another good. I'll give it a whack with a hammer. Hold on a sec. That'll do. Now, I'm going to take some of this wood putty, just a little bit of it right there, and just slap that on there. Give it a nice little rub in. Let that dry and sand it off and see how terrible the colors look compared to this. Hopefully, it's barely noticeable. Up to this point, it's taken me about 2.5 months just on the inlay, just for reference. Almost as much as I like the super shiny parts, I like how from certain angles, it almost looks like the parts turn gray. It's really cool. So anyways, I used this toothbrush and I went ahead and got all the dust out of the cracks there. So you can see they're a little bit more visible, but I'm going to go ahead and fill those all with wood putty. That's interesting. This water-based wood putty wipes away almost as easy with a wet paper towel as a very high-grit sandpaper, or very coarse sandpaper rather. Okay, I'm all done touching it up. You can see a couple of the different angles here. This light is pretty red, so the blues aren't going to come out super well, but I'll put some photos here. So this is it done. I'm going to mask it off and start working on the bracing of this piece. Alright, here's the masking job. I used the sides to trace out, you can barely see it, to trace out the inside of the brace, so I can quickly throw some of these on there. It's going to be real easy, just top, middle, bottom. I'm going to make a little tag to go on the inside. It broke a little, so I'm going to glue it back together. Alright, I'm just using some masking tape to hold these in place while I got the weights on it, to keep them nice and straight. I don't want this to resonate in any weird and unexpected ways. I'm not sure how much it'll matter, but yeah, it's weighted down now. Just gotta wait for those to glue up. I'm gonna go ahead and hack the corners off with a jigsaw to give the router a little less cleanup to do at the end. So now these are roughly ukulele shaped. I'm gonna reach under here, grab this here. I'm gonna glue it all up, I guess. It's about the next step, I think. Pretty exciting. Real quick, I'm gonna use this hole saw to cut this out and then take it the rest of the way to the final diameter with a file. Alright, 1.5 hours later, it's finally done. Nice clean circular hole. Took quite a bit of sanding, but I'm happy with it. Alright, this is the inside, and I think it's finally ready for glue up. Alright, it's all clamped up. Well, the back plate is. I've got the soundboard clamped on. This is pretty exciting. Now you'll notice there isn't a clamp here. That's because I had a bit of an issue. This side wants to buckle and crack before this little gap wanted to close. Now that gap was like a tiny micrometer, and I couldn't even see anything through it. It just seemed like a tiny gap, so I just put some glue there, and I hope that these two clamps will keep it straight enough. Yeah, remind me not to squish this thing under a hydraulic press anytime soon. Might damage the sides a little. Alright, let's see how this thing's doing. It's been overnight. Oh, come on. I don't know if I can do this with one hand. Well, here it is. I guess the next step is to, well, I've got a couple of cracks. Gotta squirt some more glue in, but they're super tiny. That's not a problem. After that, the next step is to route this edge off. Oh boy. Alright, I set up this weird little thing here so that I can test and make sure my router won't burn the mahogany. I'm just using some scrap wood, and I'm going to see how it handles routing this flush when there's stuff sticking out past it. Just bought these new bits, and I'm not sure how they work yet.